present you with the original OMG, Olivia Marie Gude.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So I want to talk to you today about this idea of bricolage curriculum. I'm going to be moving through a lot of things really fast. I can tell you that I will run a PDF of this and put this up. I'll send it to PAEA actually to put it on your website, and there's a version of this also on my NAEA education. So what I would say is kind of relax and enjoy, and don't feel like, oh, if I don't get these words down, I'll never get them again, because you can for free on the internet. Okay. On what basis do we make decisions about what to include and what to leave out of the art curriculum? One can't answer this question any longer by simply saying we include the basics, the fundamentals. Because for at least 40 years, there have been many knowledgeable people in the world of art and art education, K-12 through college, who believe teaching modernist formalism, elements and principles, and the academic traditions of drawing and painting are not a sufficient introduction for an artist today. The field of art education must change because there is no guarantee that art education will remain in American schools if we do not create a field that is perceived as relevant to contemporary cultural and educational concerns. We also need to change because in the new next generation visual arts core art standards, there's a real change in emphasis. It emphasizes experimentation, is giving equal emphasis with skill building. Investigation is given equal emphasis with expression, and choice is emphasized over demonstrating knowledge. Mapping curriculum. How will teachers choose content? What is the criteria of selection, beyond established conventions and beyond personal preferences? On what basis do we decide? What I'm saying here is that even though, no matter how detailed the curriculum is written out at a state or district level, teachers still have a lot of choice in most instances, right? So how do you make that decision? And I think there's two kinds of evidence we use. One is affective evidence, the emotions, sensations, and inklings. In other words, we're artists, and so one of the ways we figure things out is we can tell. It's not a question of being arbitrary, it's a question of being deeply intuitive. And then also cognitive explanations or intellectual reasons. So let's think about this idea of affective evidence. We know when it's working in our classrooms. When we see the students really engaged, sometimes they're noisy with engagement and sometimes they are completely silent with engagement. We can see that they're really working things out, they're interacting, or they're interacting with their materials. And so that notion, that aha, that we have as art teachers is something that we need to continue to respect. Because we are artists, and our medium is the children, the students with whom we work. We can also think cognitively about this idea of what are the reasons why. And I like to ask this as two questions. What do you need to know? What do the students need to know? So ask two questions. Does this curriculum support students in engaging and making personally satisfying and meaningful works of art, craft, and design? And does this curriculum adequately represent a range of the art, resources, artistic practices, and cultural theories in this society at this time? So putting it another way, is this curriculum faithful to the needs of students and communities? Is this curriculum faithful to the complexity of the discipline? And I think both of those things are really important, right? It has to be a student-centered curriculum, but a student-centered curriculum will never be truly student-centered unless it actually engages with the most sophisticated ideas in our field at this time. Students deserve that to be cultural citizens. They deserve to have a range of complex tools. So curriculum mapping. What methods, what models, what approaches, and for art teachers it often comes down to what projects. And sometimes people say, you emphasize projects so much, I want to have the big picture. I'm like, but projects encode the big picture, right? And that's the way, at least as a teacher, I always talk, what projects are you doing? Oh, I'm doing this cool project. Why are you doing it? Here's why. This is really interesting. When we do this, we think about this. We're able to get at these kinds of ideas, So this idea of how the project, what makes a good project then becomes the question. But also just the question, what is a project? We're also used to it that we don't actually think, well, what is a project? and what's a good project, and what did the good project do? And I think this verb is very important. What did the good project set into motion? So this is one of the subjects of the article I wrote, New School Art Styles, the Project of Art Education. And part of this article is criteria for quality projects. And I think it's a really great idea sometimes to take the time to look at some of your projects and have that list of criteria and say, yes, no, you know? Not that you throw anything out just wholesale, but that you start to actually think about what is your criteria for a good project. So here's some of the criteria I articulated in that article. Value engaging in authentic artistic processes over making facsimiles. In other words, it's not enough if you end up with something that looks like what the original antecedent art was. It has to actually engage students in understanding those contexts and in having those kinds of experiences. Value contemporary practices of a medium over curriculum that merely recapitulates the history of a medium. I mean, that's a hard one for some of us, but like many of you in this room, I learned photography is black and white photography, right? The idea that no matter what, all kids have to do black and white darkroom photography before they fully engage photography just doesn't make sense anymore. And when we hold to this idea that we have to go back, because you know what? All of us always jump in the middle, right? Like the original photographers were making their own film, right? We didn't ever expect the kids to do that. So, our painters used to grind their own pigments. So we have to realize we all jump into the middle of a discourse. And so we really have to think about preferring contemporary practices. And certainly if you ever say, oh, we're recapitulating the history, you're like, really? Value utilizing skills, forms, and vocabulary in actual context over decontextualized exercises and recipes. So the recipes say, do this, do that. I've actually been thinking about starting a movement for every time people post, 30 pictures, all exactly the same. Shouldn't we be sending those teachers notes and saying, please don't do that to your children? And as I say, when I criticize things, I've been a teacher for a long time, and everything I'm like dissing on, I've done myself, right? And that's why, in a sense, I can say that, I think, out of real respect and sympathy, and also because sometimes some of those things, there is a certain pleasure to some of those things, right? But we have to think, what can we do? What can we do more? And as I mentioned in my first slide, there is no guarantee that art education will stay in the school curriculum as things change. We have to be a relevant discipline. Value investigating over symbolizing. And that's a really important idea. Like one of the things when we're designing curriculum spiral workshop, one of our rules is if we find ourselves saying, I'm going to represent that, I'm going to symbolize that, I'm going to illustrate that, we're like, no. Because it assumes that we already know what it is we want to communicate, right? And so all I'm doing is illustrating, or all I'm doing is symbolizing it. No, what you want your art projects to do is to help the students to investigate, to understand that material for themselves in a deeper way. Now that's not always easy, right? But that's what our work is. And part of our work is to, first of all, identify things that aren't really doing that, and then how can we figure out how to do that? So what does a good project do? It introduces students to methods of making, and it creates opportunities for students to make meaning. And this make meaning component is really, really important. I mean, I'm not saying if once in a while you have like a 15-minute activity because the students are kind of wanting to figure something out and do it. Okay, but you know what? Beyond that, you shouldn't be doing exercises or projects that don't actually create opportunities for students to make something meaningful to them. So we're looking here again, this idea of the complexity of the discipline and the needs of students and communities. So what are projects? Projects are methods of artistic investigation, and I like to call them vehicles of artistic investigation. And they encode methods of experiencing, of engaging, of exploring, of generating knowledge and insight, and of being in the world. So projects are like artistic practices. There are these methods through which artists make things. And there's not like a discrete set of methods ahead of time. What happens is artists basically collect different kinds of things that have happened before in fields of art and culture, and they use those to form their own practice. So an artist's practice, this is from the Warhol, a really great website by the way, An artist practice not only suggests the techniques or media an artist uses to create art, but also fundamentally the artist's conceptual approach or method by which he or she goes about making art. So this idea of conceptual approach, I think, is very, very important. I think it's something that probably in the history of art education we have not focused on as much. We kind of are like, have an idea, tell a story. But you know, it's not even that clear what stories in your life are worth telling. You know? So I think that this idea of the method that related to the approach, the method by which you identify your own content is something which is a good idea to pay attention to in projects. So I just want to quickly show you one of my projects. I do collaborative public art. This is a piece called Cannons and Corn, a garden community. It's actually an official Chicago Transit Authority Public Art Commission, but I took this kind of official traditional commission and turned it into a community arts project. And the project itself is about the community, the elders, the seniors, and then their intergenerational supporters, who are the gardeners of North Lawndale, this very rundown neighborhood in Chicago. And so this project then is a commemoration in a permanent public art form of the temporary art form of community gardens. So when I do work, I'm thinking, how did I become a muralist? How did I become a collaborative public artist? What happened to me? One thing is I met actually the people, the group that did the first Wall of Respect in Chicago. So I was mentored through this tradition. So the idea of the street art movement in Chicago was very influential, and that becomes a root for me. Also, just looking at the idea of Los Tres Grandes, the great Mexican murals, and thinking about how they used and composed walls, very important. The community arts movement, somewhat different from the street arts movement, though part of it, especially people who were in the community arts movement, not necessarily the visual artists, but people who did oral history and storytelling became very important to me in terms of my work. But I was already in grad school at the age of postmodernism, right? So it was like text-image art was something that was on my mind. And so the idea of putting, of having text and image work together was something. Collaborative, socially engaged art practices. I mean, really, one of the, those kinds of things were emerging, and also you could say that those things really emerged from the community arts movement and the street mural movement, and actually probably enough credit is not given to to that form in generating much of the current social practice work. As a mosaic artist, I was really interested in the idea of traditional mosaic tessellation and the way it creates form, but also modernist mosaic tessellation that plays with flatness and pattern. So you can see some of these kinds of things and when you look closely at the work. I take the time to talk about that because what I started to understand was that my relationship to projects working with students was very influenced by my work as a community artist. That what you do is you build a practice, right? What are some of the kinds of ways that I work? So it's not like you just go into a community and go, I'm telling you what this is going to be. But it's also not like you just go in and go, hey folks, what do you want to make an art mural about? How are we going to do it? No, I bring with me a sensibility, a way of working, different kind of exercises. So all these things are part of my practice. So one of the things that happened with this project was the seniors started bringing in photographs of their work. And at first I was just so distressed because the city announced this commission and the design had to be done during the middle of winter. And so there was no gardens to look at. I knew these gardeners. But then I realized it was kind of a plus because I had to see the garden through the eyes of the people who made it. What were the things that they thought were significant? And of course this idea of the old train tracks and the gardens happen under the train tracks, or this kind of juxtaposition of things like cannas and corn. And then I listened to the seniors and started to record the sorts of things that they were saying, like different plants need different nurturing. Talk kindly to your plants as if they were people. These are the kind of sayings that you really think about apply to people as well as to plants. And what a great thing to read as you're getting on to a busy rush hour train in the morning. I also did community workshops where the elders learned the art of tessellation, the people who are gardeners, and then they were working with teens. So it was a teen and elder workshop, and some just regular adults too. And we worked together really to make this collaborative piece. So I take the time to show you this because, as I say, it really helped me to think about what I meant as an art teacher when I designed a project. So, in a sense, what I did was I developed a collaborative art practice. It generates a space that others can enter, not just as viewers, but as participants. Yes. The artist can utilize this artistic practice with others to identify content, investigate, and make. The artist puts into play an approach, a method that can take the work in as yet unknown direction. So that's just the important idea. You put into play this method, but you don't know what the outcome is going to be. If it's so structured that you know it's going to look like this, then that's not a good project. So a project is a borrowed artistic practice. It generates a space that others can enter, not just as viewers, but as participants. So this is what we're doing for the students, right? We're expanding their repertoire of what they can do. So it's very much, if you're like an art education theory person, thinking about the idea of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, you know, is creating these ways in which people can work in a more complex way. Students can work in a more complex way than they could on their own. So this is what art teachers do. We develop vehicles of artistic investigation. Well, it's one of the things that we do. We do lots of things, right? So this is a really, listen to this part carefully because it's really good. Paradoxically, students both inhabit these projects, these capacities for experiencing and making, and they internalize these capacities. So if you think about it, you're building this vehicle, the students get inside, they're like, this is great, it's a way of making and looking I never thought of before. I can drive it to all different places, right? The students can take it. But what happens is, because they've been inside of this way of looking becomes inside of them, right? And it becomes one of the things that they carry with them. And I like to say that rather than to say it becomes part of their toolkit, though you can put it that way too, because it's more than just being a toolkit, right? The artistic, your being as an art teacher, as an artist, isn't something that's kind of a side that you carry with you, right? It's woven into the fabric of your being and how you relate to the world. And that's ideally what happens when we teach a range of interesting projects for students. That becomes part of how they notice and engage the world. So how can we build high-quality vehicles of artistic investigation? We have to ask ourselves, what is relevant to this project, to this practice of experiencing and making? Conceptually, historically, culturally, aesthetically, technically, experientially, and behaviorally. And I think it's really useful to ask all those questions. Sometimes projects that you're already doing can become much better by actually starting to ask and address those questions in your planning process. So let's take a look actually at an artistic practice and art making approach. So this is obviously an abstract expressionist painting. You have to ask yourself, what art history, what methods, what artists, what cultural context, what would a student need to know to understand, appreciate, and make authentic expressionist work, right? So the idea is it's not just like you sort of color with markers to kind of make it look like a Jackson Pollock, right? What would you have to do to have that kind of energy of making? What would you have to understand about how one might look at a painting like that? How one might move? What energy you might channel? So that's like what you have to kind of think about when you're designing a project. Now, you also have to ask another really important question. Is this a living cultural form? And then you can't just answer that the way you want to answer it, right? You've got to actually investigate that for yourself. So thinking about this, thinking about Jackson Pollock, 1948, here's Joan Mitchell, 1982, Gerhard Richter, here's Kelly Walker in 2006, here's Tamori Dodge, 2007, Gunther Ford. People are still making abstract expressionist paintings, right? It's a living cultural form. So I can ask that question and I can say yes. Artists still make abstract expressionist paintings. They find it as a meaningful avenue to make work. Now let's ask another question. Is this a living cultural form? No! Right? I mean, obviously with the internet you can find some random artist who's working in the Cubist style, right? You can find anything on the internet. But the thing of it is, nowadays, if you wanted to make work about multiple points of view, simultaneity, the sense that the world no longer stands still, you would not make a Cubist painting, right? Now you might do something like a David Hockney photo collage, where you're looking at things from multiple points of view. Yeah, that's a living cultural form. Or something like Raymond Pettibone, where much of his sort of portraiture is done in these very wacky, kind of creepy drawings with interesting writing, like this writing, in case you can't read it, is, worse yet, the hero develops no personality or character. One never comes to care a straw about what happens to him. And that's like such an interesting piece to discuss with kids, you know. So yeah. Or a gift. This is, you know, what we did moving self-portraits as part of a workshop a couple of years ago. The idea being that we would, you know, that in a time when we know we keep evolving as people, our self-portraits also need to evolve and change. So yeah. Now we could ask something like, how about a John Singer Sargent painting? Is this a living cultural form? Well, you know, I would argue that the answer to that is yes. Whether it's doing like a Winnie Trong type piece or whether you're doing, you know, a straight up realist painting like Gabriele Dell'Osso. I mean, the point of it is, this is still a way that people work that is vital and meaningful to people. But you really have to be willing to ask that question. And again, you know how I said cubism? Come on, folks. How about pointillism? Really? You know? At some point, we have to take some of these things. And by the way, I'm so lucky right now. I'm teaching at the School of the Art Institute that owns Sunday afternoon Le Grand Show, you know, and some of these great pointless paintings. But you have to just say that doesn't mean that we should be recreating them, right? All right. How do we design curriculum? Now, here's the thing. This is a time of paradox and ambiguity, complexity, liminality, hybridity, fluidity, and real uncertainty. So the way in which we're going to have to do curriculum is going to have to reflect the times in which we live. So a lot of us grew up with the concept of foundational curriculum, but that concept is over. I think that instead we need to think of curriculum with different metaphors. Does that mean just do anything? No. Well, one metaphor I think is very useful is to talk about comprehensive curriculum. Comprehensive defined as covering many eventualities. It's like comprehensive insurance. You all have comprehensive insurance, right? Sometimes when I talk to the students in college, they don't know what it is. You're like, your parents are. So, comprehensive insurance. Let's think about this. How does it work? If a tree fell on your car, will your insurance plan cover it? Okay. If a hailstorm dents your car, will your insurance plan cover it? Sure. Covers many eventualities. What if a giant inflatable sculpture landed on your car? Will your insurance plan cover it? What if a giant inflatable sculpture of dog poo is in the news? Will your artistic understanding plan cover it? And of course this really happened. You know, Paul McCartney did this gigantic blow up of dog poo. By the way, if you want to have a deep discussion with like 3rd and 4th graders, show them. They are like, oh, this is deep. This is deep. And they'll be talking about your art class in the school cafeteria. What if an important artist deliberately destroys ancient urns? Will your artistic plan comprehensively cover your students' comprehension? Like Ai Weiwei takes real ancient urns, like 1,000 years old or something, and he dips them in bright industrial paint. He puts Coca-Cola labels on them, and then he took this incredibly expensive Han vase, and he had himself photographed dropping it. And of course, the students could be like, "What?" But then, you know, the point of it is, our students need to be able to say why that's art. And it's interesting, when we're having a kind of conversation like this, one time one of the kids said, well, it's definitely art, it's definitely a bad thing to do, and it's meaningful. And you can kind of stick with those things, right? You know? That now a lot of times people are like, that's bad, it doesn't mean anything, but that's not true, you know? It's like, it is a meaningful act, potentially, and then we can kind of decide whether or not we think, you know, this notion of the ethics of an artwork has a long tradition, you know, in contrast to its aesthetics, it's a long tradition that goes back to Leo Tolstoy, well, it goes back to Plato, but it goes far back. So basically, I thought it'd be kind of nice after we broke up the vase to turn it into art, and this is a bricolage folk art site in France, La Maison Picassiette. And I know this is where I first learned the term bricolage, which meant making something out of all different kinds of stuff. So it's not like that mosaic I showed you, which is all out of, you know, the same kind of glass tile. No, this is made out of saucers and broken bottles and little tiles and this and that. So this idea of making something out of all these different materials, this word bricolage. So a bricolage is the construction made of whatever materials are at hand, something created with a variety of available things, a piece created from diverse resources. So now I want to talk about this idea of bricolage curriculum. And again, you see what's happening? I'm looking for metaphors that we can use to explain in a reasonable way what it is we do at the point when we give up the notion of foundational curriculum. The disciplinary strength of such a frame for curriculum is its acknowledgement of the complex, contradictory, and ever-evolving nature of artistic practices. So that, the fact that you might teach the students one way of doing things, and then a few weeks later you're like, you know what? You could reject that and do it a completely different way. And the students can be like, what? But the meaning comes in the in-between spaces there, where they have to see that there are these different approaches that one could use. So, bricolage and bricoleur. Bricolage, sorry, I said it way too fast in the name. It has a long history in theory, including from Claude Lévi-Strauss, who in a classic work on anthropology contrasts the bricoleur who adapts the means at hand compared to the engineer who creates out of whole cloth with specialized tools. And in some ways, this notion of the engineer and the bricoleur is really the contrast between modernism and postmodernism. Like modernism, we believe they could invent everything new, right? And postmodernism says, well, you're going to use a little bit of this, we're going to use a little bit of that, you can start here, you can start there. And the thing is, this is not controversial. This is the way you all make art. This is the way the kids are used to thinking of things. We don't think of this idea of a single pure source anymore. I was interested when I come up with this idea of bricolage art curriculum to find out that there's actually a history of writing about bricolage curriculum within the critical pedagogy movement. So Joe Kinchela coined that term, and he used that term to talk about this idea of a complex, contradictory curriculum. And he contrasted it to something that he called federat. Okay, federat. It's like letters, Formal. Random letters. Formal, produced by rigid adherence to particular methods. Intractable, the world is seen as static and inert identity. It's decontextualized. It removes the things we teach kids from diverse contexts. It's universalistic. It assumes that findings apply to all domains, all times, all domains. It's reductionist. It focuses on factors that are easily measured, and it's one-dimensional, the belief that there is only one true reality, one true way of doing things. So let's think about that in terms of our field in art education. Where might we find that? Elements and principles. I mean, if you think about it, it fits all these categories perfectly. This idea of saying it's universal. Any kind of art, you can use this vocabulary. It reduces it to something which is easily measurable. And actually, Marilyn Stewart, sitting in the audience, and I have talked about the fact that in some ways, elements and principles got this kind of promotion at the moment when people had to write standards like 25 years ago. And so it was something that people could kind of say, well, yeah, that's something specific that we can say we do, And so it but it was never meant to be, what it had become, which is somehow this idea that it is the whole picture, So, forget that. Let's instead think about the idea of bricolage curriculum. The bricoleur is the woman who works with any tools at hand. The bricoleur art teacher is the woman who surveys art and culture and chooses those tools, cultural theory, and artistic practices that meet the needs of students and their communities by providing access to a wide range of interpretive and meaning-making strategies. So, like, hello, bricoleur teachers, right? Mapping curriculum, bricolage curriculum. Again, this notion of the needs of students and communities and the complexity of the discipline, and these things are interrelated and supported by. The truth of it is you cannot support your kids and your communities by using 19th century artistic methods. Now, there might be methods that are rooted in the 19th century that are still relevant, right? But the point of it is you need contemporary methods to investigate contemporary life. Neatness does not count. It is not possible to develop 21st century curriculum in matching sets where each uses an element or principle or each uses that introduces the different media, or each unit is based on a period of history. It's going to be much more eclectic than that. And the other thing it's going to be other than beautiful. This is the word web that the students did one year, talking about what are the things that art can be that is other than beautiful. And it's a great exercise to do with your students, because at the point when it's like, that's not realistic, or that's not beautiful, it's like, well, remember that word web we did? We looked at a bunch of art, and then we kind of worded, we vocabulary out. Vocabulary is a whole new word. We put down what are other things that art can be. So I could think doing other than realistic would be a great word web to do with students. Projects are not mere exercises. Projects have intrinsic value. Projects, individual or collective enterprise, planned and designed to achieve an aim. And this idea of having a point, why would you do this? Here's a project, Gazette, autobiographical comics. So now I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures. The idea of this project was to do autobiographical comics, but it was also to think about this idea of gazing and looking, and how, so this emergence of visual culture work in art. So this is a piece that one of the students did about how there was a new baby, and she just wanted to see the baby, even though she'd been told to leave the baby alone. So she tiptoes into the room, and she wakes up the baby, and she gets in big trouble, But this idea of really being compelled to look. Or here's a piece, I love this one. I like him, he likes her. She's not even that pretty, says the girl in the soccer uniform drenched in sweat. What are you looking at? Says the girl who's with the guy she likes. And then I'm so embarrassed. Of course, this creates this really great conversation amongst the students about this idea about being the girl who's desired or not desired, and what's that about. Here's one of the boys did. He's talking about, he's walking down the street, and I love the street scenes. This kid is just a brilliant artist. And he's walking down the street, just looking at stuff and kind of bopping along, and then he sees this woman. And she's got on tight pants, and she looks good. He's so excited, he gets his feet tangled in his own shoelaces and falls flat on his face.
Dang, I like that, dang.
There's another one in a coffee shop. So, do you come here often? Why is that really creepy college guy staring at me? Huh? And then they're just kind of talking about what it's like. Now, what's interesting is, can you imagine the conversations that happened when we had, in the same class, one of the students making this piece about looking at women, right, and desiring, and then these girls making this piece about the creepy college guy who's looking at them, I mean, you notice it's not like some 6-year-old guy, it's just like a college guy, like a weird 22-year-old guy, why is he looking at me, But, it's interesting because instead of just going like, objectification and kind of lecturing the kids, it actually gets them to start having conversations about this idea about how the visual shapes our lives, how it shapes our notions of gender. Here's another one which is really pretty stunning. Yay, I got out of school early. So this kid's walking down the street, he's coming home from the school in Chicago, and a car drives by, and the car sort of pulls up alongside him, and they call out, "What you is?" And he's like, "What the hell? Leave me alone." Because basically people are thinking maybe he's a gangbanger, and he comes out with a bat because he's walking in the wrong place at the wrong time, and maybe he had on slightly the wrong color or something. He's a smart kid, he wouldn't have done something really flagrant. But I mean, I know one time I was mistaken for a gangbanger because I happened to have on ochre and black, and it looked like, this gangbanger guy startled, like he was ready to shoot me, and it was like, oh, it's just a lady, But I mean, it was interesting to think about how much that kind of those sort of scene can contribute to safety. So you see, why would we do a project like that? Well, it talks about autobiographical experience. It also teaches them some skills too in setting up dark light and how you might make these things. It also says, experience like this. I mean, when the boy was telling us a story about being identified potentially as a gangbanger, he was shaking. This is like a tough 16-year-old Chicago kid, but you never get to talk about these kinds of experiences, right? And so it gives you a way to identify experience, but it also becomes this avenue into all these conversations about visual culture. So, that's why you would do that. There's another project we kind of like, senseless sensory mapping. And it's based on the idea of exploring walking. So this is a psychogeographic map of Paris where the situation is just to do these maps and show what would happen if you walked places where you didn't do it for a practical reason, but where you drifted. We talk about drifting and doing drifts with the kids. And then Vito Canci's piece from 1969 where he used to see someone, right? And then he would start following them. And then he would just follow the person and take photographs of the person. And until they went into a private space, and then he would stop. And then he would make a diagram of this piece. So, this idea of using this as an artistic practice. This piece, the artists Abramovic and Ule, who did a lot of work together where they would like braid their hair together or tie themselves together for like a year and stuff. They decided, and they really did do that, they decided to stop performing together. And what Abramovic has said is that it would be so sad if we just suddenly stopped performing together. There had to be some sort of ritual to commemorate that. So they went way far apart, miles apart on the Great Wall of China, and they came walking together. And when they came together, they greeted each other, they shook hands, they touched, and they ritualistically parted. Now what's interesting about this, I think, is that this is one of the things I did not see coming. It raised this deep conversations with the students about breaking up with your friends. Not even like your boyfriend, girlfriend, just breaking up with your friends. And you realize, we all know that one of the things that happens is we have people we're close to, and as we develop, we go different directions. But we have absolutely no way of talking about that in this culture, right? No way of saying to kids, you don't have to hate the person that you don't want to hang out with anymore. You can say, thank you, I honored this friendship, and now we're going to go different ways. And this was one of these things that was so meaningful to me, having the students kind of come to this place of talking about something that's missing in their lives. Here's Gabriel Orozco yielding stone, in which he pushes a ball of clay through the streets, and the sculpture is made from the impressions that happen and the things that stick to it. Our Francis Alice, something making something leads to nothing, in which he basically pushes a block of ice through the streets of Mexico City until it's just a wet stain. Our Richard Long, many pieces that he sent since back in the 60s, where a line made by walking. He walks in a landscape, and then he photographs the trace of that. Or here's one which is kind of cool. He laid out a circle, and then in this kind of like field, and then at every minute he stopped and it made a word to record what he was feeling at that moment. I can imagine this being an interesting thing to do with students. Or this piece here, angle iron keeps the ant from escaping. And then the artist traces the path of the ant in the piece. And so what makes the painting is the track of the ant. So what does it mean as a human being to start really paying attention to this little creature and to recording its movements? So having done that, this is the spiral workshop. We did the skeletons just there all the time. It's a leftover from the Day of the Dead altar we did years ago. And so the students are doing contour drawing, kind of remembering that. And then we talked about doing contour drawing in light. So the students are blindfolded, and there's one leader for each group. And then we led them through, we were right on the edge of downtown Chicago, so we led them through the city. So you experience the city blindfolded. We also were in this big parking lot, which is basically empty on Saturdays, and did these tests like, can you keep walking in a straight line if you can't see? Or can you try to walk? We did all these kind of tests about body movement and sight. And then the students decided, wait a minute, and then what they're doing is they're drawing. So see, they're getting led, and then they're drawing on the paper on the person in front of the back, They're following their path, and then every once in a while we say, stop, take a sensory impression and write or something. But then these students decided this was an old-fashioned activity, and so they got out their cell phones, so they took pictures of where they were when they couldn't see. And then when they got back, they compared pictures to see where they had been, which is really interesting metaphorically, I think. And so some of the drawings are quite beautiful, too. The idea is that all of a sudden, everyday life becomes different, right? Like I heard a student who was leaving, and he said, I am walking to the quick shop, and it will be an artistic act. Performance proposals. Sometimes, some people do great work with youngsters with performance, and I think especially with grade school age kids, it works really well. Some people do great work with high school kids. We've done a lot of work with performance proposals originally. So here's a piece by Ellen Caprow. This is a free plate. If you choose to take it, please leave a chalk outline of the plate and write what you plan to do with your new plate. Thanks and enjoy. And that was originally done in 1968, and then across the country there were reenactments of Ellen Caprow pieces in 2008. Here's another one, Ellen Caprow, taking a shoe for a walk. Drag an old shoe through the streets. Periodically repair shoe with bandages. I can imagine a lot of students would really enjoy doing that, right? Yoko Ono, the understanding that Yoko Ono, John Lennon's wife, was actually this important Fluxus artist, just like a wake up for some of the students. Dance report on hiding. Hide in the cupboard until your family starts to wonder, or B, until your family forgets you. Make a choice. So here's some of the few that the students wrote for their performance proposals. Loud talker. Wanted, people who like to yell and are good at improvising. Materials needed, a large cell phone at least 12 inches long, a black suit. Procedure, walk into public places yelling personal things on large cell phone. Get as many people to stare as possible. Oh, here's another one. This is what parking ticket envelopes look like in the city of Chicago. Make replicas of parking tickets and put them on random cars. But inside the envelope, put short, cute poems and happy pictures. Do not enter. Lock self in bedroom for entire weekend. Block out light. Remove any electronics, phone, TV, computer, etc. Don't talk to anyone. On Sunday, realize that you just wasted a whole weekend. So teenagers, stop bitching about your lives. It's not that bad. And this one I love. You will have 25 minutes to complete this task. When taking standardized tests, ACT, SAT, PSAT, PSAE, etc., use answer key to make an origami swan. and you see what starts to happen, like this kind of contemporary way of making starts to become a real avenue for kids to talk back to the culture, which is just, shaping them and oppressing them and, compressing them. And it becomes this kind of really interesting way to create a shared space of people talking about that. Making faces. So one of the things that's really true is that a lot of artists in the last 20, 40 years have used their own bodies as a way of making art. So this famous piece by Bruce Nauman Fountain and Hannah Wilkie, SOS Curlers. So here the students we're in the dark. This is how we did this. The room is really dark. It looks like light now, but it was dark. And then we had them facing the wall. We were going through things like, stretch your mouth as much as you can, scrunch up your face, open your wide, but they're just facing the wall, all the students, in the complete dark, right? And then they start adding things. Stretch your mouth out to the left, stretch it to the right, all these different things. So they start just warming up. And then we had a camera person, a lighting person, and then the actor, and then the students took multiple pictures of themselves. So you can see the pictures are really cool. And they start to, in a sense, use their own bodies as a way of making art, a strategy that many contemporary artists use. And they love seeing themselves all together. Now, having done that, then we did a project called Social Situations. So we were looking at artists like Sidney Sherman, who create these setups, but also Charlie White. If you don't know Charlie White, write that down, because he is so interesting. This is a piece called from the Understanding Joshua series. And the thing of it is, what Charlie White says about it is that Joshua is just a normal person. He just feels like he looks like that. So the whole series of Joshua things, which are really interesting to discuss with students. And then the students make their own social situation projects. So we use worksheets at Spiral Workshop as a way of identifying content. We tried calling them subject surveys, but the students didn't know what we were talking about. We just go, how about a worksheet? Okay. And the students will say, oh, I love those spiral worksheets. They make you think about the strangest things, And that's the idea, to help you, elicit content. So in this case, have you ever been to a surprise party, a graduation party, a school dance, a prom, a baptism? It's interesting how these things in themselves create very interesting cross-cultural conversations. Quinceañera is on there, but also even just things like a slumber party. My mom would never let me do something like that. Or a funeral, really? You've never been to a funeral? Interesting conversations. And then there's follow-up questions. So one of the questions in this one was, actually one of the original questions was, have you ever cried in a social situation? And this was one of those examples where I think that even though I have 6 brothers, and I would like to think that I'm very attuned to guys, I remember the first generation of this just said, have you ever cried? And then we realized that just as likely would be questions like, have you ever made someone else cry in a social situation? But for boys even more so, have you ever been kicked out of a social situation? And it was really interesting how so many of the teenagers who did this were like, oh yeah, I was told. And none of the home, you know? It's like really interesting kind of thing. So what I always say, when you do these worksheets to try to elicit content, it's a really good idea to talk to men, you know, and to basically try to, you know, figure out avenues where the guys can talk about their experiences in a way that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have. I mean, you know that thing I was showing about the gays and projects like that? I was doing that with my college students. I had done that. I've done, you know, stuff on visual culture for years. It never occurred to me, you'd be like, really? But it never occurred to me that, you know, sometimes for guys in a classroom, it's embarrassing if they look at, like, you know, a naked painting or something, because then, you know, people might look at their crotch and they're embarrassed, and that it never even occurred to me to think about that as something that the teenage boys would be experiencing that I should be aware of, you know? It was just kind of an interesting moment. I see several men in the audience nodding, you know, so like, just think about gender when you're making these worksheets. So the kids wrote film scripts, right? So this was a film script for Liz Can't Dance. Film scenarios, basically, not scripts, scenarios. And then here they are, the one person is the photographer, then the other person who wrote the scenario is the director, and then the other people are the actors. As you can see, we just did kind of a makeshift white ground. We didn't have time to build sets and everything, and then we just photoshopped it to like a pure white ground. So this is Liz Can't Dance, another version of Liz Can't Dance. And, you know, the students just got so excited about the things they were doing. This one, the girls wanted to do this piece about boys fighting at a party, but they felt that the boys were not good enough at acting the way boys act at parties, so they put on shirts and ties, and they were the ones who were enacting the story of this fight at a party, you know. So you can see it gives kids opportunities and to make stories about their lives in interesting ways, to talk about situations that happen. So here's another one. I have no regrets because it's a self-portrait painting class. We do a great job with painting. We decided that here the students, we decided that talking about this with the kids, that they wanted to talk about being old. And so they, instead of painting paintings, they painted themselves. And they wrote these statements of, I'm having my 100th birthday party, I have no regrets because, you know. This one I really love. I started to realize that we mostly only talk to kids about certain things when we're yelling at them. And I say yelling in quotes, because I remember once my stepson said, and then you yelled at me. And I'm like, I never yelled at you in my whole life, which is true. But for him, it was like talking sternly meant yelling, you know. So, but we never talk to students about things like lying, unless we're saying, you lied, you know, or punishments, unless we're being like, you're punished. And so one of the things that we've done a number of times in curriculum is do curriculum about the idea of punishment. Punishments you've received, and you deserve it. Why? What's this about? And then at one point we started to think about this idea about, well, we started thinking about secrets. You know, teachers are always doing projects about, like, make this secret and put it in the reliquary or something. But then we started to think about lies, which are different than secrets, right? So we did two related projects. So this is the secrets project. And basically we have these little frames that are from light switches. And the students wrote their secrets, but we realized this, a secret which is sealed away forever is not exciting. What makes a secret exciting is it might be discovered. Right? So the students wrote their secrets, and then, of course, when the show happened and the parents were there and everything, all the parents are scrutinizing their brains. They're trying to figure out which one is their kid and what secret is going to be revealed, right? And then this one, lies. So we started out by doing that thing where you say, you know, lying is always wrong. And the kids can position themselves along the line, whether always or never, you know. And then, you know, like all these questions about lying. So we started this conversation. And then this form got made, designed by the students, and then we typed it up. Lies. Who told the lie? Not your name, but like a parent, or to whom, when, what was the lie, and then they marked the severity of the lie from fib to total betrayal lie. So we thought the students would do like six or five or six of these, right? When we started doing them in the classroom, they just started writing lies like crazy. I mean, we had like piles of these. We had to go to the Xerox machine and make more forms, right? So then after the students had made all their own lies, then they started categorizing the lies, and they came up with different kinds of categories, like lies in a relationship, lies to cover up, lies of self-aggrandizement, lies of omission, and another one was lies you told for no good reason. And that was fascinating, because almost everybody has the experience of having lied. If somebody asks you something, you just tell a lie. You know, and it's like, why did you do that? I mean, I did that when I was young, you know. And it was so, the fact that all the students were like, oh my gosh, you've done that, you've done that. And so we started talking about, what's that about? And if you notice, the categories don't match, by the way. You know, I mean, it's like lies in relationship, lies of self-aggrandizement, lies, you know, they're just kind of, but these were the categories that came up with from looking at the lies. So then, this was a social practice project. Oh, so you can't really fit. So what we did was, I must have left out a slide, but basically these are set up on a table as part of a workshop exhibition, and people could come up and they could take a lie form, and then if they wrote a lie, then they had to categorize the lie, and then they could take a lie and read it, right? And there were people who spent like lots of time writing lies and taking lies and having these discussions around the lie table.
That's
you know?
hilarious.
And it was just fascinating to have a conversation about, you know, this very common human experience. Okay, you're gonna be like, what? An Elements and Principles accordion book. You know what? I mean, when I was doing this thing for the Terra Museum and the Block Museum in Chicago, working with grade school teachers who were not art teachers, and I realized they really don't have any vocabulary like elements and principles, and they needed it to talk about art, right? And so I invented this project for them. And basically, it's an elements and principles book. You can do it like in, I don't know, it depends, like in high school in a week or something. And basically, you start, and it's kind of an interactive thing. You do it all together. You make a shape. You make variations of the shape. Okay, now everybody, position the shape. Now reposition the shape. Okay, come up and you get to use the overhead projector and let's watch and see if you can create, and so you kind of do this as a group. It's very interactive, and then in the end, you put your definitions on the back and also your about the author, and then you can basically have a study book for elements and principles. It takes a week or 6 or 7 days, right? Now what are you going to do for the rest of the year? And the thing of it is, the kids actually, it's actually kind of a beautiful thing. And, students actually learn from doing this. So the point is, not that you don't do these things, we have to figure out faster, smarter, more authentic ways of doing them. So, when we think about, this traditional elements and principles, or even if we add to that, so we think, is the purpose to get rid of elements and principles, And I actually have to say, I don't think it is. But I do think to be real, we have to also have a whole bunch of other terms. And some of these are drawn from, the postmodern principles. But look at over here, terms like chiaroscuro, abstraction, saturation, depth of field, interactivity. We've been using those terms for years. In some ways, it hasn't been true that that's been our core vocabulary. But also terms like wabi-sabi, the idea of like the kind of rough quality, like Japanese pottery, which of course was like some of the most refined porcelain in the world, also has this tradition of very rough-looking pottery, the aesthetic of wabi-sabi. So the thing of it is, it's really arrogant for us as Westerners to think that only our terms are the terms that can be used to sensitize ourselves to aesthetics, especially when we're talking about the art made in other places and other times. So that's what the X is, all those other things. Now here's the thing, what do we want to do with those things? We're not trying to get rid of them. We're trying to get rid of them being stuck in exercises, right? We want to free them so they can, become part of our art-making possibilities. So bricolage curriculum. Curriculum that surveys art and culture and chooses those tools, artistic practices, and cultural theories that meet the needs of students and communities by providing access to a wide range of artistic practices, art-making approaches, a wide range of interpretive and meaning-making strategies. And you notice I say interpretive because the exact same strategies are there in the interpretation responding as are there in the, the same orientations, let's say, as there are to the making. So let's look at the new Visual Arts Standards Glossary. It actually has the word art. By the way, some of the coolest stuff in the new Visual Arts Standards are in the glossary. It's really worth printing out. Art-making approaches, diverse strategies and procedures by which artists initiate and pursue making a work. In the Create section, the second enduring understanding is artists and designers shape artistic investigations following or breaking with traditions in pursuit of creative art-making goals. So the related beginning high school standard is shape an artistic investigation of an aspect of present-day life using a contemporary practice of art or design. Now you notice it's the student who's doing the shaping, which means that you'll have had to introduce students to a range of art-making approaches so they can make choice. Artistic investigation. In making art, forms of inquiry and exploration. Through artistic investigation, artists go beyond illustrating pre-existing ideas or following directions. Students generate fresh insights and new ways of seeing and knowing. And then contemporary artistic practice. That's a lot. Okay, but this is so cool, it's worth reading. I broke it down. Processes, techniques, media, procedures, behaviors, actions, and conceptual approaches by which an artist or designer makes work using methods that, though they may be based on traditional practices, reflect changing, contextual, conceptual, aesthetic, material, and technical possibilities. Continuing. Examples include artwork made with appropriate images and materials, social practice artworks that involve the audience, performance art, new media works, installations, and artistic interventions into public spaces. I mean, these are the standards now, right? This is like saying, this kind of range of things is what, what would be part of a quality art education. The important thing to remember is the next generation standards fight harmful educational, artistic, and cultural obsolescence with contemporary art-making approaches. In other words, wouldn't it be dumb if we wrote the same kind of standards that people wrote 20 years ago, where it's like, oh wait, the world has changed and our standards haven't, Instead, by focusing on art-making approaches, contemporary art-making approaches, it means that we as teachers shape the field. We continue to add in contemporary approaches as time goes on. So whether it's like Cindy Sherman, like I showed you before, with inspiration for some of the work by the kids, or someone like Lori Simmons, who does this work where she's photographing dolls, or Assumed Vivid Astrofocus, the collaborative group that does art and makes these gigantic sort of immersive environments. Oh my gosh, shouldn't we be able to do this when we've got a million kids working with us? Our Inigo Manglano Ovalle, who not only, actually I put his name backwards, but Inigo, who does have youth making video, but then he came up with these ideas of having some of these installations where the neighborhoods would see the videos that the students made about their work. Or someone like Mark Dion, who basically has done a lot of work that deals with artifacts, or organizing them, or drawing them. So this idea of the artist as anthropologist would be a very cool way for your artist to work. I mean, these are just like 5 or 6 things that I sort of pulled out. Obviously, there's an endless number. And by the way, one of the great sources for doing this is our 21. I mean, you go and see what are some of the strategies that those artists are using. Look, we often can't control the politics of keeping arts education in the schools. We can make art education relevant by teaching sophisticated, contemporary understanding of how meaning is generated within culture. We can emphasize our role in building students' creative and conceptual capacities. Okay, in the Create section, the second enduring understanding. Artists and designers shape artistic investigations, following or breaking established conventions in pursuit of creative art-making goals. The message of that to teachers is support students working individually and collaboratively to pursue their own creative research agendas. And the point is that part of our work is to have students have creative research agendas, have them think about what that might mean to work in that way. There is a crucial need for freshly conceived projects, new vehicles of artistic investigation, and we need to share these. And that's why it's so great that the internet exists, right? Because we can share these cool ideas. Conclusion, beginning, or really it's a continuing, because art teachers have done this, good art teachers have done this for years, right? But this, we hope, is like a renewed emphasis. And also support for teachers who do this when someone's telling you to do something the same and boring every year. Survey your current curriculum, identify a project that is not an authentic vehicle of artistic investigation, drop it from your repertoire. Instead, try a project based on a contemporary art practice, a contemporary art-making approach. You notice this is a bricolage approach. It's not make the whole thing new all at once. It's like, look, things are real, this one, I'm just not that into it. Get rid of it. What could I do instead? You know, and if you make that part of your practice as a teacher and your collaborative practice with other teachers, you're going to find yourself, you know, developing an increasingly exciting curriculum. Oh, right, back to the elements and principles. Let's instead have a student guide with activities for changing the world. Because we've got to draw the line somewhere. Modernism is over. Form a movement, shape the future. Thank you.